Hey friends, my name is Jake. Welcome to Canadian Cutting Edge. This is my first video back since my medical stuff really went haywire, and that's because I decided to get off of all my prescription opioid class painkillers. I thought I was going to recover more quickly than I have, and I'm still very, very far from recovered, but I need to make a video for my own sake. Hopefully this video is going to be worth watching though. Today we've got the SAMSON. This is the Adimanti line of knives from Ganzo. This is their second knife, or the second major knife. Basically it's a dagger in sort of an older kind of style, but a very modern take on it. And we're going to take a good close look at it. It comes in a whole bunch of different colors, I think 5, and it's in the low 60s of US dollars in most stores. And I got mine from White Mountain Knives, where you can save 10% with coupon code CCE. And that's enough intro. Let's get to the tabletop and take a look at it. Let's start off with the most important thing. How well does it cut? And not so great. It does okay. This is not really designed as a cutting knife. Anybody who's carrying this thing and says this is a good ODYSEE knife, oh, wait a minute. Let's check out who might say something like that. Adimanti will help you deal with all kinds of issues in your wilderness survival and daily life. No, that's not what this knife is about. This knife is not an ODYSEE knife. This knife is a self-defense knife. It's for puncturing into things. Things that are alive that you don't want to be alive, or at least things that you want to stop threatening you. That's what it's designed for. So this is not a knife that I would be carrying in Canada out in the public. I just wouldn't do it. Others might. Hey, do what you want to do. It's your life, right? It's not mine. I do what I want to do. You do what you don't want to do. But anyways, if I was to use this for an ODYSEE, it's not that great, especially since generally when you're cutting, you're either cutting with this area of your knife or this area of your knife. This area here, the grind angles are actually pretty decent. Here it's just nasty. And, it just doesn't cut all that well. And like I was saying, and, with your thumb up here, it just doesn't work all that well. I'll talk more about that later. It doesn't cut all that great, but it pierces quite well indeed. All right, let's start describing this thing. Basically what we've got here is a dagger. It's not a double-edged dagger. This is not sharpened back here. It's fairly thin back there, but not, super thin at all. And then we've got a full thickness spine section up here, the badging on it, a fuller, we've got a basic spear point tip right there. They do have a sharpness trail on here, which is quite rare on daggers, at least traditionally. They kept it fairly small, and yet it's big enough to be effective and good enough for, sharpening the knife a number of times. And the spine of the knife, you got a chamfer on the spine here until it comes down to, this swedge, this false edge, if you will. And it was bead blasted before they ground it. So you've got bead blasting here all the way around on that edge, bead blast in the fuller, and that's about it. Other than that, it's a satin finish. Now the grinding on this, it's pretty decent for the price of this knife. It's pretty close to right down the middle. Not exactly. This side's a little bit off. And unfortunately, this is the show side. The Adimanti badge is right there. And, the spine comes a little off center on this side, but it's pretty close to the middle. Do I expect better? I don't know. For this price, it's actually pretty good. And it'd be nice if it was better, but that's just the way it is, isn't it? Perfection isn't something that generally you expect on a budget knife, and that's what this is classed at in the budget range, at least in my opinion. By the way, the badge on this side says SAMSON/D2 Brutalica, design made by Ganzo, and that's all we've got. The badging's okay. I do wish that the badging was a little bit smaller and that this false edge probably came back further, because I can't see somebody wanting to do this. This is not very comfortable. Certainly not for any extended period of time, because you've got this piece of steel right here pushing into the side of your knuckle if you're doing anything. And that's quite uncomfortable. Reaching over for most people, that's okay. You can do that. But this side, not so good. Classic guards for a dagger. This guard is what's normally a flipper. And when I first looked at the knife on pictures and stuff, I thought, man, that's going to be a little bit big for a flipper. It's going to be awkward. But it's not really an issue. It's easy to actuate this knife. Just a sideways pull or even a pull over like this works just fine. And then, of course, you've got that as a guard. So if you take this thing in a reverse grip, you can be very, very safe and secure that you're going to stab into something. Even if it hits, a brick or whatever, your hand's unlikely to come up over this edge and get cut. Certainly not impossible, but unlikely. Let's go into the handle. We've got steel bolsters. It's the liners have the full thickness there and at the end of the handle, and then they're actually thicker than most liners are in here. And then we've got G10 slabs screwed on with T6 button screws, and I dislike T6 button screws. Thankfully, these screws are a fairly good size. Let's see. You put the driver in there, and they're nice. They're not loose. Well, the screws have been loose. What I mean is the interface between the screw head and the head of the driver are nicely done. And we've got T6 back here as well. And again, nicely done. And we've got T6 on the pocket clip screws. Again, nicely done. Not a lot of slop. And this guy here is a T8. And it's pretty good. Pretty good T8 screw. So there's that. The shape of this thing, very traditional kind of simple dagger shape. It's getting wider at the back and then rounded back here. Pretty good. We've got a steel back spacer back here and a lanyard hole. There's a pin in there. I like that they got that pin. And it looks a little tight, doesn't it? A friend of mine said that he couldn't get 550 paracord through there. So we're going to see about that during this video. But the back spacer's kind of nice. And then we've got the pocket clip. This is probably the worst mistake on this knife, is the pocket clip. It is, a useless pocket clip. It is so very tight. And there's not much room in here. I just found it mostly unusable. I'm not happy with this pocket clip at all. When the knife is closed, like I said, you've got this false edge. It's not sharp at all, and that's just fine in your pocket. And it's pretty good. We'll talk about the dimensions in a little while. There is skeletonizing in here, and yet the balance point is, where is it? Right there. So it's fairly far back, but not bad. Another con, at least on mine, is the screws were just coming loose, especially the pivot screw. I could open and close this thing for, not steady, but just open and close it probably 50 times and this screw would be loose. And, and once it gets loose, then the blade alignment would be way off. When it's properly snug, the blade alignment's great. And lockup is quite nice as well. So that's all good. Lots of good access here to the side to get the lock release to close it. All that's good. So construction-wise, it's constructed fairly well, except for they should have done something about these screws, because even these screws were coming loose. The body screw back here, the G10 screws, not absolutely every one, but more than half of these screws were loose. Pocket clip screws, they stayed tight. Okay, now we're ready to take the thing apart. There's 3 screws that you need to take apart to take it apart. Of course, the pivot screw, this screw here on the body, and the one next to it over the G10, and it comes apart quite easily. And of course, we've got a lock bar insert in there, so they didn't have to harden the whole thing. That's a nice little upgraded touch. I'm happy for that. And there's a steel detent ball. And we've got steel ball bearings in there. We've got a captured stop pin. We've got skeletonizing in here. And yeah, you can clearly see, especially in person, how thick that steel is right there. And, the knife is decently constructed. Not great. The action on it is okay. What do we have? We got 3, 6, 9, 10 ball bearings, which is better than the usual 9. Take that one out there too. And other than that, very simple, straightforward construction. I like that it's a closed front for a stop pin there. And this is a not a free spinning pin, I should have said. You can see they tried to do a little bit more weight reduction on that back spacer, even a tiny little bit right there. And we will talk about the weight and everything in just a minute. Other than that, the construction is pretty good. These 3 screws are well made, and I would use Vibratite VC3 instead of Loctite. I don't like Loctite products. Loctite is simpler to use. Vibratite is a little bit messier to use, but Vibratite is much more appropriate for knife screws, in my opinion, and I've got videos about it. You can go see those. The other thing I was going to talk about is paracord and this back here. So let's see if paracord fits through there. 550 paracord, I think, would be a pretty tight fit. I got some right here on my big ferrocerium rod. And let's just see, if we take it apart, can we fit 550 paracord in there? And yes, 550 paracord with the contents inside fits in there, but you have to take the knife apart, put it in like this, and then put the handle back on, and then you can fit 550 paracord through there. But that's the only way that you're going to get 550 paracord in there. Other than that, you'll have to buy some smaller paracord. And paracord comes in loads of different weights, much, much lighter than 550. And of course, you can get it heavier than 550 as well. Sizes and dimensions and all that stuff. How much does this thing weigh? It weighs 164 grams. What is that? That's 5.78 ounces. Yes, 5 3/4 ounces. That's quite a bit of weight. How sharp is it from the factory? Well, the average score that I got on here, and I measured it in 3 places, 215 bests, still considered sharp, but not excessively sharp, or not, very sharp. How about the measurements of distances? The tip to the sharpener's choil, the cutting edge is 92.7 millimeters, 3.65 inches. Yeah, it's a big knife. From the tip of the blade to the closest spot on the handle, 93.7 millimeters, 3.69 inches. And the thickness of the blade stock, 3.3 millimeters, 0.13 inches, so just a bit over 1/8 of an inch. The blade depth, 24.0 millimeters, 0.945 of an inch, so just under an inch this way. How thick is it? Just behind the edge grind. 0.53 millimeters, that's 21 thousandths of an inch. It's a little bit thicker than I'd prefer, but it certainly makes that edge robust. The grind angles, well, the average grind angles, this side's got an average grind angle of 25.3 degrees. This side's got an average of 21.6 degrees. It started off here at the heel at 17.6 degrees. I thought you said it was bad. Well, I'll tell you in a minute. Right here in the middle, 21.8 degrees, and then 25.5 degrees. And that's how you get 21.6. That's 7.7 degrees of change along the length. Quite poorly sharpened. This side started at 28.1. Yeah, that's pretty bad. Went to 22.3 and then got worse again, 25.4. So the average is 25.3. So yeah, poorly sharpened. To get a consistent angle all the way along here, you're going to have to grind off a fair bit of steel. And that's steel that you're never going to get back. And that's what I really dislike. I wish knives were more consistent on the angle so I don't have to, take off a whole bunch of steel the first time I sharpen it. Because the first time I sharpen it, I want to give it a consistent angle. I hope you do too. Most people would. The handle length, 118.7 millimeters, 4.67 inches. The grip area, so about halfway through this bolsters what I'm saying, it ends at the end of your grip. Just under 10 centimeters, just under 4 inches. The thickness of the handle here on the G10, 15.7 millimeters, which is 0.618 of an inch. The handle depth, it's widest right back here, 28.1 millimeters, 1.11 inches. The knife, when it's closed, of course, the widest point is these guards. 44.3 millimeters, 1.74 inches. And the total length of this knife when it's open, 212 millimeters, 8.35 inches. And the more precise measurements on the cost, White Mountain Knives has got this for $61.99. Take off 10% with coupon code CCE, that's $55.79. That's around 76 Canadian dollars for this knife. Although I wouldn't suggest buying this and having it imported into Canada, at least not complete. I have my handles and blades shipped in separately for most knives these days. And you can't get that from any stores. You got to get somebody who lives in the United States to take it apart for you. So most Canadians can't do that, unfortunately. Amazon, a little bit less for the blue version, $59.99, but the other colors are $64.95. That's about $88 Canadian for the other colors. So yeah, White Mountain Knives is generally the best place to get this, and I'll leave links down below for other places, you know, depending on where you live. I'll try to find stores that have these somewhere near you, maybe, hopefully. So what are my final thoughts on this thing? It's a good idea. The execution is okay, not great. I can understand that they wanted to make it robust and strong. They did that, but they made it quite heavy as well. Now it is 3.65 inches, so that takes steel, but they could have lightened it up by bringing this false edge or this swedge further back. You know, I don't like badging on, you know, bevels, but I'd rather have this be a little bit lighter. Maybe put a hole in the middle of each of these. That makes it a little bit lighter. Make this steel a little bit lighter. Make the back spacer G10 instead of steel. You know, they could have made it lighter and still had the same length and still had it very strong. The other big thing, the pocket clip, it's useless. I didn't even show you how I use it or how it goes in a pocket because it doesn't work. It's, at least mine, this tension here is very tight. It's, with all this texture on this G10, it just doesn't want to go in there. Maybe if they would have smoothed out, made it smooth, you know, back here, at least down the middle, you know, left this texture here, because the texture is good for grip, but the texture is terrible for grip on your pocket. So you could take it apart, you could sand that down a little bit, but the pocket clip I think needs to be a little bit longer as well. That would give it a little bit more flex as well. It's just not done all that well. Screws coming loose, that's not very good either, because you don't want to be losing a screw while you're out and about. At least I wouldn't want to. And at this price range, they certainly could have used ceramic. They could have used ceramic balls on the detent ball and on the ball bearings. It's the Adimanti line. Come on, guys. Ganzo, you can do these things. I know you can, because you've made some really good knives at some really good prices for years and years. Yeah, it's sort of okay. If you really like the looks of this thing and you don't mind a terrible pocket clip, maybe you're going to, you know, find some kind of sheath for this, take the pocket clip off, just have a little tassel lanyard, something, you know, to help you pull it out of the sheath. Maybe that's what you want. And I think that'd be a good way to carry this. But the pocket clip, you know, not so good. It's a good looking pocket clip. It's just not so good. So I probably missed a bunch of stuff. You know, this is my first video back in a long time, pretty much. I've done very few videos in the last 1.5 months. So it's May. I may as well put out this video. Huge shout out and thank you for my supporters, those of you who stuck with me, supporting me on Patreon and YouTube memberships. I appreciate your help an awful lot. Please like, share, comment, and subscribe. Tell me what you think of this knife. Either you have one or you don't. You certainly have thoughts on it. Let me know in the comments. And I read them all and I reply to them all. It's just that it might take days, it might take a week, it might take more than a week these days for me to reply to your comments. And remember, friends, always cut towards your chum or stab towards your wall. Not me, and certainly not yourself.